The execution of 74-year-old Dr. Klaus Schilling took place in the German city of Landsberg. He was sentenced on May 28, 1946, for conducting inhumane medical experiments in which he used 1,200 concentration camp prisoners as test subjects for malaria vaccines. As a result of his experiments, 30 people died immediately after receiving the injections, and from 300 to 400 prisoners subsequently died from severe complications caused by the so-called injection of joy. Dr. Schilling conducted his monstrous experiments starting in 1942, and all the subjects were involved in them through coercion under the guise of voluntary participation. That's the man we're going to talk about today. Klaus Schilling was born on July 5, 1871 in Munich, the Bavarian capital. He received medical education in his hometown, successfully completing his studies with a doctorate in 1895. He carried out his professional activity as a doctor in the African colonial possessions of the German Empire. Due to his deep knowledge of tropical diseases, in 1905, Schilling received an invitation to a position at the prestigious Robert Koch Institute. In 1936, Schilling decided to move to Italy. During this period, the Italian government expressed serious concern about the increased incidence of malaria among members of the Italian army during the Second Italo-Ethiopian War. On behalf of the Italian authorities, Schilling began research on immunization processes. To conduct his experiments, he gained access to patients in psychiatric institutions in Volterra and San Niccolo di Ciena. His research activities were partially funded by the German government. Numerous inhumane medical experiments on prisoners were carried out within the walls of Dachau. The prisoners were subjected to research on the effects of extremely low temperatures, high pressure, various gases and toxic substances, as well as forced infection with dangerous diseases. Brutal surgical experiments were carried out, during which prisoners were often not given anesthesia. Modern society must carefully study and remember such crimes against humanity in order to prevent the recurrence of such inhumane experiments on people in the future. Knowing the historical facts about conducting such experiments serves as an important warning for future generations. According to various sources, between 42 and 70,000 people died in the Dachau concentration camp, including 7,000 Soviet prisoners of war. During the entire period of the camp's operation, about 250,000 prisoners from 24 countries of the world passed through it. In concentration camps, inhumane medical experiments were justified by supposedly scientific goals. When selecting prisoners for these experiments, strict age criteria were applied. Preference was given to young and physically healthy people aged 20 to 45 years. In addition to the main contingent, there were special age groups, including a group of teenagers from 14 to 16 years old, on whom experiments were also conducted. Experiments with the use of chemical warfare agents, originally developed during the First World War by Fritz Haber, a German scientist of Jewish origin, Ashkenazi, were conducted in specially equipped rooms. After the completion of these inhumane experiments, a pathoanatomical examination of the bodies of the dead was carried out with detailed documentation of the results. The victims' organs were sent to various research institutes and laboratories for further study. In early 1942, Heinrich Himmler allocated Klaus Schilling a specialized malaria research station located in the Dachau concentration camp. Despite numerous negative reviews from the professional community, Schilling continued to lead the malaria research station throughout the war period. Schilling insisted that his research could be carried out without harm to health, but in reality, the subjects at Dachau were subjected to severe torture. They were placed in special cages filled with malarial mosquitoes. After infection, prisoners were treated with synthetic drugs using dosages ranging from high to lethal. During the experiments with malaria in Dachau, more than 1,000 prisoners passed through the research, of which from 300 to 400 people died as a direct result of these experiments. Among those who survived, many were disabled. After the liberation of the Dachau concentration camp at the end of the war, a trial took place in which Klaus Schilling appeared before an American military tribunal. This tribunal was convened on November 2, 1945, to consider the case United States for Martin Gottfried Weiss Wilhelm Rupert, and other defendants. 40 doctors and medical workers were brought before the court, who were charged with crimes related to violations of the laws and customs of warfare. They were charged with participating in a common criminal scheme, encouraging, aiding, abetting, and directly participating in the ill treatment of citizens of Allied countries and prisoners of war held in the Dachau concentration camp and its branches. According to the testimony of August Vueg, the subjects in the experiments on malaria and its treatment methods were citizens of Poland, Russia, and Yugoslavia. It is important to note that in that historical period, there was no officially adopted code of ethics in the field of medical research, which judges could rely on when considering cases of Nazi doctors. It was the shocking scientific experiments that were revealed during the court proceedings that served as the catalyst for the creation of the Nuremberg Code. This document, developed in 1949, was a 10-point set of ethical principles for conducting experimental research involving humans. During the trial, Schilling addressed the court with an emotional speech in English. Concluding his speech, he burst into tears and begged to be given the opportunity to complete his research, even if using less violent methods. He said, "I have done a tremendous amount of work. Losing these results would be truly tragic. I am not appealing to you as a judicial authority, but as people, do everything possible to allow me to complete this report. All I need is a table, a chair, and a typewriter. It would be of great benefit to science, to my colleagues, and would give me a chance for redemption." On December 13, 1945, a military tribunal sentenced Schilling to death by hanging. After the verdict was announced, he asked his defense lawyer not to appeal, saying that he would prefer death to long-term imprisonment. Despite the fact that many representatives of the German medical community came out in support of him, describing him as an honest and humane scientist, the verdict remained in force. On May 28, 1946, Schilling was executed in the prison of Landsberg, Anderlecht. When Schilling was given the opportunity to say his last words, he stated, "I am innocent. Please end this." That's the kind of man who turned out to be a very pleasant and harmless grandfather who put science above any human sacrifice. Friends, this is how the video turned out. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, put likes and write comments.